Part 1. The dawn slowly crept up to the tallest treetops of the ancient forest, bathing the sky in a faint amber glow. A thin mist, like smoke rising from Mother Earth's breath, drifted lazily between the rough tree trunks, veiling the forest in a soft, dreamlike haze. Birds began their morning chorus, not in harmony but freely, painting a melody of life in the air. Below, a small stream trickled quietly, its gentle murmur whispering age-old tales that had slept deep within the heart of the forest for thousands of years. The camera moved slowly, capturing every detail, letting viewers feel the fragile peace that blanketed this place, a peace that carried an unsettling undertone, as though the forest itself held its breath. Then, breaking through the stillness, came a sound that did not belong, faint, uneven, like stifled sobs that refused to stay silent. The camera panned softly, gliding past moss-covered roots, until it stopped on an image that tightened every viewer's chest, a tiny bear cub. Its fur dark brown and drenched from last night's rain, sat huddled beneath an ancient tree. Its coat, which should have been as soft as an autumn carpet, was now matted and clumped with mud. Its eyes were swollen and red, and silent tears rolled down its cheeks, mixing with the cold earth. From time to time, it let out a small, trembling cry, a sound heartbreakingly similar to a lost child weeping alone in a vast, uncaring world. The lens drew closer, revealing its tiny, shaking paw scratching weakly at the soil, as if searching for something that was no longer there. No other living soul surrounded it, no warmth of a mother bear, no protective embrace, only raw, unfiltered fear gripping its fragile heart. The vast forest suddenly felt colder, as though it, too, had just realized that something terrible had happened. The wind sighed through the leaves, carrying invisible fragments of memories long gone. The little cub glanced around, its tear-filled eyes shining with despair, as if waiting for a miracle it somehow knew would never come. A branch snapped nearby, making it flinch and curl up tighter. Its young instincts urged it to run, but exhaustion weighed too heavily on its tiny legs. And then, a voiceover emerged, deep, distant, as if pulling a story out of the darkness. No one could have imagined that, in the middle of this lush forest, a single cry would lead Park Ranger Mark to a truth that would shatter his heart. Questions hung in the air like a taut string, suspended above the audience's heads. Why was this little bear alone? What had happened in the silent hours of the night? And its mother, was she out there somewhere? Or would she never return? The frame froze on the cub's tearful eyes, reflecting an unspoken sorrow and a story yet untold, as if inviting viewers to step closer and uncover the truth hidden behind those tiny drops of grief. Part 2. Mark, a park ranger who had spent nearly half of his life devoted to this forest, walked slowly along a trail buried beneath layers of damp, decaying leaves. The backpack on his shoulders swayed with each step, the faint clatter of his old radio mingling with his steady breathing. This morning should have been just like countless others, checking animal traps, looking for signs of illegal hunters trespassing, and noting the movement of deer that often grazed near the forest's edge. But then, a strange sound slipped into the calm air, faint, mournful, like a desperate call for help from a creature on the verge of collapse. Mark froze. His heart carried a special kind of instinct, honed by years of living among the trees. He pulled his binoculars from his jacket pocket and lifted his gaze. Scanning the misty canopy ahead with seasoned eyes, nothing moved except the haze and the dark silhouettes of trees. Yet that sound lingered, drawing a frown to his brow. It was not the chirp of a bird, nor the cry of a young deer. It was weeping, a sound rarely heard in these deep woods, where survival demanded that every creature hide its weakness. He stepped forward cautiously, as though every footfall might disturb some truth hiding in the undergrowth. The closer he came, the clearer the sight became. A tiny bear cub, curled up beneath an ancient tree, like a lost fragment abandoned in the vast wilderness. Mark stopped several yards away, careful not to approach too quickly. He knew that a bear cub rarely strayed far from its mother. If it was alone, either its mother had been killed, or she was trapped somewhere nearby. And to Mark, that almost always pointed to one thing: human interference. Raising his binoculars, he studied the scene more closely. There was no sign of the mother bear. What unsettled him just as much were the chaotic scratch marks in the dirt. Broken branches scattered on the ground, and several footprints pressed clearly into the damp mud. They were not the tracks of an animal. They were boot prints, the kind worn by poachers. A faint tang of rusty metal lingered in the air, the unmistakable scent of a hunting trap. A cold shiver crept down his spine, as though the forest itself had just whispered a bloody tale it could not keep hidden any longer. The cub lifted its head and looked at him. In those glistening black eyes, there was not just fear, but something closer to despair, like a helpless child silently pleading for a saving hand. Mark felt his heartbeat slow, his chest heavy with grief. He knew that one wrong move would send the cub bolting deeper into the woods, where predators and more traps might be waiting. He crouched low, making himself smaller, less of a threat. His voice was deep and warm, rolling through the tense forest air like a calm wave. "It is all right, little one, I will not hurt you." But the cub only shrank further. Trembling where it sat, Mark's eyes swept the area again. The human footprints led north, interspersed with dragging marks, as though something heavy had been hauled away. This region had long been plagued by poachers who captured bears for their bile or sold them on the black market. He had seen scenes like this before, and every time, the helplessness gnawed deeper into his heart. Slowly, he removed his glove and extended an open hand, not daring to take another step. He needed the cub to sense that this human was different, not one of the monsters who had torn its family apart. In that suspended moment, an invisible thread formed between man and animal, a fragile yet powerful connection holding them together. If only for now. Years of experience whispered to Mark that this was no accident. A crying bear cub, strange human tracks, shattered branches, all that painted a dark picture slowly coming into focus. And he understood that if he did not act now, the truth hidden within this forest might disappear forever, along with the mother bear's life, and perhaps even the tiny, trembling soul before him. Mark's eyes hardened with resolve. This was no longer just a routine patrol. This was a plea for help. And he, a man who had sworn to protect this forest, could not let that cry vanish into the morning mist. Part 3. Mark drew in a slow, deep breath, letting the cold, damp air of the early morning forest fill his lungs. In front of him, the tiny bear cub remained where it was, its tear-streaked eyes filled with fear and helplessness. He knew he could not just stand there and watch anymore. Something terrible had happened, and time was not on his side. He scanned the surroundings once more, every small detail captured by his seasoned eyes, each fragment fitting into the dark puzzle of a crime. Deep claw marks in the soil, signs of a desperate struggle, tufts of bare fur clinging to nearby bushes, stained with fresh blood that had yet to dry, and most haunting of all, a broken steel trap lying abandoned, its rusted jaws bent and twisted as if something had fought with every ounce of strength to break free. Mark knelt, his fingers brushing lightly over the bloodstains. They were still warm, his jaw tightened, a low, simmering anger rising within him. He had seen the brutality of poachers too many times before, yet his heart never stopped aching. And today, that pain cut deeper, because right before his eyes, a small creature was crying for its mother, while somewhere in the forest, an adult bear was bleeding, possibly dying. He turned back to the cub. It trembled when their eyes met, but it did not run. Perhaps, on some instinctive level, it understood that this man was different from the monsters who had shattered its world. Mark made a choice that every safety rule told him not to. He approached. Step by careful step, he closed the distance, his voice low and steady, giving the cub time to accept his presence. When he was near enough, he removed his jacket, knelt down, and slowly draped it over the small, rain-soaked body. To his surprise, the cub did not resist. It only let out a faint, weary sob, as though it had run out of both strength and tears. But he could not linger. Time was the enemy. The tracks on the ground led north, where the poachers might have taken the mother bear. Mark slung his backpack back on, then crouched and lifted the cub into his arms. The tiny body felt frighteningly light, each fragile breath fluttering against his chest as though it might vanish into the cold morning air at any moment. He knew carrying the cub was risky. Its cries could attract predators or the poachers themselves. But leaving it behind, the thought of this little life dying alone in the wilderness tightened his throat and made his arms instinctively hold it closer. The path ahead was far from easy. The forest grew darker as he ventured deeper, branches interlocking overhead like a shadowy maze. Every step was a calculated search, his eyes sweeping for any clue. A leaf darkened by blood, a drag trail in the dirt, human footprints that appeared, then abruptly vanished. The poachers were skilled at hiding their tracks, but they had made one mistake. This forest was Mark's home, and he knew its every breath, every heartbeat. After a while, a new sign made his stomach clench, a torn piece of wire mesh stained with blood, and a few long brown hairs from the mother bear. Mark closed his eyes for a brief moment, imagining the horror that had unfolded, cries of agony tearing through the night. The vicious snap of a trap, steel wire biting into flesh, dark figures dragging a desperate, thrashing body away. The cub must have witnessed it all, and the memory still haunted those tearful eyes now closed against his chest. Inside Mark's mind, a silent battle raged. If he went alone, he could move faster, maybe even catch the poachers in time to save the mother bear. But leaving the cub here would be signing its death sentence. Its fear seeped into him, anchoring a heavier truth. His duty was not only to stop evil but also to protect life itself. Even the smallest flicker of it. He tightened the strap of his backpack and quickened his pace, determined to carry the cub with him no matter the risk. His whole body was taut, like a drawn bowstring, straining to shield the fragile life in his arms while staying alert to every threat lurking behind the trees. The forest no longer felt peaceful. Every whisper of wind, every snapping twig made his muscles tense, as if the poachers could step out of the shadows at any moment to silence the only living witness to their crime. The darkness of the forest thickened, the chill of the mist settling deep into his skin. Mark felt an urgent force pushing at every step, an unspoken truth burning in his chest. If he did not find them soon, if they managed to take the mother bear out of the forest, all hope would be lost. And he knew then that this was no longer about a ranger on his daily patrol. This was a promise, a vow to save a family on the brink of being torn apart forever. Part 4. Mark's footsteps quickened as the trail led him into a sparse patch of forest. Faint beams of sunlight pierced through the canopy, falling on a sight that sent a chill racing down his spine. In the clearing stood a makeshift camp, thrown together with a few dark, weathered tarps. Beside it lay a large, rust-stained iron cage, tipped on its side, and inside it, the mother bear. Her once mighty body was now only a shadow of exhaustion, her fur matted with blood and dirt. One of her legs was clamped in a cruel steel snare, swollen and dark purple, each breath escaping her lungs like the hollow whistle of wind through stone. The cub stirred in Mark's arms, its eyes wide as it recognized the familiar scent. A trembling whimper left its throat as it struggled to leap toward the cage. Desperate to reach its mother, Mark crouched and gently set the cub down on his jacket. Then he stepped closer to the cage, his chest heavy as lead. The padlock was large, stained with fingerprints and smeared blood. He gave the cage a shake. Its frame was solid, built to keep its prisoner inside at all costs. The mother bear opened her eyes, dark orbs clouded with fear and pain. Staring at this strange human, she did not know whether to trust or fear. But when her gaze fell on her cub crawling toward her, she let out a low, broken moan, a sound that trembled like a plea for mercy. Digging into his backpack, Mark pulled out a small crowbar and a set of wire cutters. Time was not on his side. The poachers would return soon to finish their vile work, and he could not let them find him here with the mother and her baby. Wedge by wedge, he forced the crowbar into the hinges, every muscle straining, veins standing out on his sunburned forearms. The metal screamed in protest, refusing to yield. Gritting his teeth, he shifted his angle and threw his full weight into it, breath rasping in his throat with effort. At last, a sharp crack split the air, a sliver of hope. The door sprang open a few centimeters. Seizing his chance, Mark jammed the cutters into the lock and twisted hard. The steel wire snapped, carving a deep scrape into his hand, but he barely noticed. The mother bear staggered out, trembling from pain, yet her maternal instinct was stronger than her wounds. She moved toward her cub, every step in agony, but unstoppable. The cub rushed forward, pressing its tiny head against her bloodied fur, releasing soft cries that mingled grief and relief. Mark stepped back, silent, witnessing their reunion. Amid a forest steeped in cruelty and danger, the bond between mother and child glowed like a fierce, defiant flame, so strong it tore through the darkness of fear and suffering. His eyes stung, his hands shook, and he did not even notice. But the rescue was not over. The distant growl of a truck engine rolled through the trees. The poachers were returning. Mark moved quickly, grabbing his first aid kit and kneeling beside the wounded bear. With brisk, shaking hands, he rinsed her injury with water from his canteen and wrapped it tight to stop the bleeding. The mother bear gave a low growl at his touch, but her eyes were no longer wild with terror, just weary, holding a fragile sliver of trust. He gestured for the mother and cub to retreat into a thicket of trees. Then he hurriedly gathered dry branches around the iron cage and lit them, sending a plume of smoke curling skyward, a distress signal for the forest rescue team and a distraction for the returning hunters. As the engine noise drew closer, Mark ushered the bears deeper into the woods, his body forming a living shield in front of them, his hand gripping his hunting knife, not to kill, but to protect. While they hid, the cub clung to its mother, soft whimpers escaping into the still air. The mother bear tilted her head and licked the top of its head. A simple gesture, yet it held a power beyond words. Unconditional love, comfort in the midst of pain, a promise to survive even in a world too cruel to understand their bond. Watching this, something inside Mark broke open, as though a silent door had swung wide in the deepest part of his soul. He understood, more than ever, that every living being deserves protection, not just because it breathes, but because within it lies something sacred that human greed has no right to destroy. Only when the truck's engine noise faded into the distance did Mark finally exhale. He switched on his radio, his voice hoarse and low, calling for the forest rescue team and giving their location, marking it as urgent. An hour later, the sound of helicopter blades thudded through the misty sky above the trees. When the rescue workers set a stretcher on the ground, Mark stepped back, watching the mother and cub lifted to safety. He sank onto the earth, his hands trembling uncontrollably, sweat and tears blurring together on his face. In that moment, he knew what he had witnessed was greater than his duty as a forest ranger. Greater than enforcing wildlife laws, he had saved something far more precious than a life. He had saved a bond, a force so fragile yet so powerful it could move even the most barren corners of the human heart. Part 5. 3 days after the rescue, the forest where Mark had once heard the faint cries of the bear cub had fallen silent again, returning to its natural stillness. But inside Mark, nothing was the same. The tense hours, the desperate eyes, and the love shared between those two creatures replayed in his mind every night, making him realize his job had never been just a profession. It was a quiet vow to protect the fragile life of the wild. At the wildlife sanctuary, the mother bear received treatment for her wounds and intravenous fluids to regain her strength. Every day, Mark would sit quietly in the corner of the room, watching in silence. The cub was always curled up against its mother, its eyes no longer filled with panic, but glowing with a peacefulness he had not seen since the day he first found it. One afternoon, the mother bear slowly turned her head toward him. Her gaze held no human words, yet it carried something deep and powerful, a softness intertwined with lingering sorrow, a silent gratitude that crossed the boundaries of species. On the fourth morning, the veterinarian delivered the news. The mother bear was strong enough to return to the forest. Mark stood beside the specialized vehicle that would take them back home. The road into the wilderness felt like moving through a slow-motion memory. Every bend, every tree trunk reminding him of that morning, the tiny cries, the blood on the leaves, his trembling arms holding a fragile life that clung to hope. When the truck's door opened, the mother bear paused for a few seconds, as though breathing in freedom once again. Then she stepped out, limping slightly but walking with determination. The cub trotted alongside her, its little legs quick and eager, as if guiding its mother back into the embrace of the wild. Mark stood a few yards away, not wanting to intrude on this sacred moment. His hand tightened and then released unconsciously, like a father watching his child step away, finally heading home. Suddenly, the mother bear turned her head. Her eyes sought him out and lingered for several long beats. In that silent exchange, Mark saw everything: the pain she had endured, the love that had refused to break, and a purity of gratitude so profound it left his throat tight and his heart raw. No sound was made, no gesture offered, but that look alone would stay with him for the rest of his life. Then, mother and cub disappeared into the green depths of the forest, their footsteps melding into the whisper of rustling leaves. The clearing was quiet again, with only the cool, tender breeze brushing against Mark's jacket. He stood there for a long time, afraid that if he walked away, that moment might vanish forever. On the way back to the ranger station, Mark switched on his radio. His voice was lower and steadier than ever as he reported, "Increased patrols in the northern sector. The traps and poaching activity are worse than expected. We need to do more." He knew he could not save them all, but every life he managed to protect, even just a bear cub or a tiny bird, was a reminder that nature is not merely a resource for humans to exploit. It is a sanctuary of love, the family, of lives as precious as any humans. The final image before the screen fades to black, a vast expanse of emerald forest. Sunlight and wind drifting gently through the trees. And somewhere, deep within, two bears walk side by side in freedom, as if no pain had ever torn them apart. Part 6. There are moments in life that force us to stop and see the world with different eyes. The moment Mark cradled the trembling bear cub, its tiny eyes red and desperate as it searched for its mother through the misty forest. That was one of those moments. We often think that love is a gift exclusive to humankind, but is there anything more sacred than a fragile little creature daring to defy fear? Daring to cry out in the darkness of the deep woods, all just to find the warmth of its mother again? A mother's love needs no words. It is in the way the injured mother bear dragged herself forward, every step filled with pain, just to hold her cub tight against her chest. It is in Mark's eyes, a man who once believed he was nothing more than a forest ranger doing his duty, now trembling in awe of the unbreakable bond between two wild lives. And yet, how many such sacred bonds are torn apart every year by human greed and indifference? How many creatures cry out in despair? How many wild families are shattered forever, simply because someone decided that life itself has a price tag? If the cry of a single bear cub can break one man's heart, how can we ignore the silent cries of an entire wild world being threatened day after day? Let us stop, let us listen, let us remember that we are not the owners of this planet. We are only guests allowed to live upon it, and when we protect a single life, we are not only saving an animal, we are saving the last fragile piece of humanity within ourselves.